Three, two. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I am Jimmy Cody. I am the sports editor for the Greyhound this year, and I'm joined by Larry Collmus. What's going on today, Larry? How you doing?
Oh, everything is good, Jimmy. Having a good time, and it's nice to be with you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I like to hear that. So let's dive right into it. Why don't you tell us about yourself? Why don't you tell us what you do? I mean, I obviously know who you are very well. I'm a big fan of yours, but maybe the people listening, they don't.
Well, I announce horse races for a living, which is kind of fun. Grew up in Maryland. Grew up in Ellicott City, and started going to the track as a young guy. My father put in the sound system at the tracks in Maryland, and I got interested in doing that. And now I've kind of made my way up the food chain, and I announce all the Triple Crown races, the Kentucky Derby, Preakness, and Belmont for NBC Sports, and also work at a few racetracks. Lately, Del Mar out in California, and before that, the New York tracks. And so I've been kind of all over, but it all sort of started for me in Maryland.
So you mentioned that you work for NBC.
Yep.
Obviously, that's a huge gig. That's a big time thing. And I've heard this story before, but I really want you to tell it again. Tell us what happened when you first found out they were interested, just from the beginning.
Yeah, that's a pretty good story, Jimmy. I have to admit it's fun to tell as well. So I was at the time the track announcer at Gulfstream Park in Florida, and their racing season back then went from January to late April. And when April came along, things were very quiet. A lot of the best horses left and went up north, and so I was just a very quiet, I believe Wednesday or Thursday afternoon, I'm not sure which, and I'm in the announcer's booth, and the phone rings, and I see the number come up. I always remember the number 212-444-4444. I'm like, no idea what this is. So I pick up the phone, and the guy says, I'm looking for Larry. I said, this is Larry. He said, this is Fred Gadelli. I'm the producer for the Triple Crown for NBC Sports. And I figured maybe they're calling me to see if they could use my call of the Florida Derby for their Kentucky Derby show or something like that. And I'm like, hey, Fred, what can I do for you? So, well, we want to talk to you about calling the Triple Crown. I'm like, what? At the time, Tom Durkin was the longtime voice of the Triple Crown for NBC Sports, and he had stepped down from that position, which I did not realize, and he had told nobody. It wasn't public yet, so I was skeptical of this phone call, and I said,
Yeah.
"Well, as far as I'm concerned, that's Tom Durkin's gig. Why are you calling me?" And so they're like, "Well, Tom is stepping down, and we want to talk to you about it. Can you fly to New York and meet us?" And I'm like, okay. And so I get to NBC. Back then. Their headquarters were at the 30 Rock, right in Manhattan, and
Hmm.
have a meeting with all the NBC guys. And then afterwards, I'm in the right in the office of the producer, and Fred also is the producer of Sunday Night Football. And the schedule had just come out for the Sunday Night Football season, and I look and I see somebody's walking into Fred's door behind me, and it was Dick Ebersol, who was the chairman of NBC Sports at the time. And so I'm like, oh, wow, this is crazy. Dick Ebersol's walking in. So he goes right by me to Fred and says, oh, did you see the schedule that came out? We got this game and that game and blah, blah, blah. And Fred goes, he says, oh, Dick, this is Larry. We're talking to him about, taking over for Durkin. He's like, oh, okay. But what about this game and this football game? And totally disinterested in me, and then so as I'm sitting there, Ebersol walks out of the room. He turns around and he goes, hey, Larry, do you believe us now? So the whole thing was a setup. And
That's funny.
and then so later that night, I flew back to Florida, got the phone call back from Fred saying, welcome to NBC Sports. And I remember going outside and yelling as loud as I possibly could because it was just like a dream come true, and it happened so fast.
Yeah,
Uh, you know,
that's a great story.
I've been calling races for 20 something years, and all of a sudden, one week things change. It's just a neat story.
Yeah, that is a really good story, and I'm glad you told it. Thank you. I appreciate that
Sure.
because I think that when they hear that, they're like, "Wow, I can really relate to this guy. Look, he was just calling races at Gulfstream Park. Not that that's nothing. Like I love Gulfstream; it's a great
Right.
place, right? But then you're replacing Tom Durkin. That's pretty
Yeah.
pretty hard to do, right?
Pretty
Which
good.
leads
Pretty
me
hard
in,
to do. Yeah.
yeah, which leads me into my next question. So you haven't called a race let's go to quarantine time here. You
Yeah.
haven't called a race in a very long time, right? So was the last race you called the Pegasus? Because I remember you calling it for NBC, and then so you didn't really call anything until Del Mar when you replaced Trevor Denman for the year.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I called the Pegasus, and then I think the next race I called was the week of the Belmont Stakes, which was in June.
Uh huh.
They had me come in and called because this wacky year the Belmont Stakes was
Yes, yes, the
always the
Belmont.
third leg of the Triple Crown was the first.
Hmm.
So I called the stakes races on NBC Friday and Saturday of Belmont, and then that's when I went to Del Mar and in Southern California after that for the summer. So yeah, it had been a few months of not calling, but it's like riding a bike; it comes right back.
Oh, that's good to hear. I'm glad it comes right back to you because with that process, trying to memorize the silks. Were you practicing like during the time off? Like, there was the races at Oaklawn and Gulfstream every weekend, but that was really only a couple places running. Were you like practicing at all or no?
A little bit. I did. I turned on TVG in my place here in New Jersey and turned the sound down and called a couple of races just to sort of make sure I still knew how to do it, and
Yeah.
then felt like everything was okay. And I've always found that for some reason, and everybody's different. For me, I'm better fresh. Having not called for a while, I usually come back really well, and then the week after that is a disaster. It's like all of a sudden you think in your mind it's like, oh, okay, everything's back to normal when you really aren't 100% back to where the adrenaline got you through the first week, and then the second week you're like, okay, everything's cool now, and then you're not. You start making mistakes, and it's like, okay, back. Let's take it back a little bit, and then you'll be okay. But yeah, it's there's so much involved in people don't realize what gets involved in calling races. It's like taking a short-term memory test every half an hour. You get all these horses names in your head, and you do it by studying the jockey silks. So you're constantly looking at the horses on the track, repeating their names to yourself until you feel like you know who they all are, and then that race goes, and you're pretty much not looking at anything but the horses. That race is over. You forget every one of their names because in a half an hour you get another race. So you
Yep.
could ask me 2 minutes after a race who won. I'm like, I don't
All right. So my next question for you was: you said you called the Belmont. I already know that you called the Kentucky Derby a couple weeks ago. You called Del Mar this summer, and then you called Kentucky Downs. Now, at all those places, there were no fans. How did that feel to you?
It was definitely weird, especially the Kentucky Derby. I mean, when you're used to 150,000 people surrounding you as you're calling this race and see nobody, it's just totally bizarre. And the same thing for the Belmont Stakes, because I was actually outside at the Belmont on the third floor in like a seating area calling the race. And, they come onto the track to Frank Sinatra's New York, New York, to a crowd of zero,
Hmm.
and it's like, this is just eerie and surreal. And, it's a lot easier to get around at Churchill for the Derby because there's nobody
Yeah,
around there. But let's not make a habit of this. Let's hopefully this is over soon and we can get back to a normal state.
definitely agree with that. So, did you find it to be easier to call the race, or was it like no difference? Because especially at a place like Churchill, what is there, 100 something thousand?
Yeah, you get like 150,000
Yeah,
for that race, and you see all kinds of, colors everywhere. And
yeah,
to be honest with you, yeah, it was a little bit easier because not only do you see, fewer people around, but just the fact that you don't hear the screaming and the excitement of the fans sort of eases your heart rate down a little bit because it's hard. I mean, if you don't get excited about calling Kentucky Derby, you're a robot. I mean, really. I mean, so it's the ultimate race for American race callers and American racing fans. So yeah, I mean, the fact that there wasn't anybody there definitely made things a little bit easier, just because you felt like that, your heart rate went down and you could see a little bit more and you weren't quite as nervous.
So my next thing for you is, just out of curiosity, you called the races at Del Mar, all these other places where I just said, are you a bettor? Do you bet during the race? I know some announcers do, some don't. I was listening to Travis Stone a couple weeks ago, calls the races at Churchill Downs. He's like, I don't bet any races at all. And then there's Pete Aiello at Gulfstream. He'll be on Twitter. He's like, oh, I just got knocked out of the pick 4 by some bomb. You know what I mean? So it's an announcer preference, but just out of curiosity, how about yourself?
I'm not a big bettor myself. Bet very rarely. Only when I see something, or there's a particular horse that I'm really fond of, or maybe saw a horse get into trouble in a previous race that was subtle, and maybe somebody didn't quite see it and think the odds are too high on the horse. But to be honest with you, I might make 5 bets a year. That's
it?
Yeah, that's about it. If that many, I can't even remember the last horse I bet on.
Really? So you didn't make any at Del Mar?
No, didn't bet a single horse at Del Mar. Just enjoyed the sea air and the atmosphere there, and calling the races in California. It was a blast out there. I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, Del Mar, you're so close to the beach. I mean, it's beautiful. You can just tell on TV that it is absolutely beautiful. So my next thing for you was about, your start of your career.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned to me this when I was going to interview you a while ago, but just didn't work out. No biggie. I don't care.
We got it.
But yeah, we got it. So that you went to Loyola, where I go to school, and you were there for a semester, I believe you said, but then you left to become a race caller. Tell me how that all worked out.
Well, I was my father put in the sound system for the Maryland racetracks. So basically, he did the main gig in the summer of the Maryland State Fair at Timonium. And so I would work for him in the summer. Basically, I was mechanically incompetent, so all I could handle was if the sound was loud enough or not loud enough to turn it up or down. So I would be in the grandstand at the track while he's setting up all these fair exhibits and things like that. And I would just hang out at the racetrack, and I fell in love with horse racing and the people around it. I just felt like I fit right in, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do in racing, but I knew it was going to be something. And I just started watching all these racing shows. Back then, you didn't have like racing all the time, like simulcast betting. You only got to see the track that you were at. And so I would watch these weekly replay shows that would have the highlights, the big stakes races of the week from around the country. And I would hear these different announcers, and I would like, whoa, these guys, this guy sounds like this guy sounds like this, Dave Johnson, Trevor Denman, Tom Durkin, all these guys. And so I would do impressions of some of the announcers in the press box. So one of the people that worked up there, Clem Florio, who was the handicapper for the Washington Post, he said, why don't you try this for real? You do mimic all these guys. I'm like, well, how do I do that? And he's like, well, get a pair of binoculars. And the fellow that ran the press box, Eddie McMullen, found me a room on all the Maryland tracks where I could practice calling races. So I used to go up there on the weekends. When I was in high school, I went to Mount St. Joe in Baltimore. And then, on the weekends, I would be at the track and practice calling races. And then I graduated from high school, went to Loyola, found that I was at Pimlico more than I was at Loyola. And
that's good. That's funny.
I mean, it was true. So one day, the general manager of Pimlico heard me practice calling races, and he said, "Do you want to be the backup announcer and call one race a day?" I was 18 years old, and I said, "Sure." That sounds like something's like, well, we want you here every day. And I'm like, all right. I'm like, this college thing's over for me. This is what I want to do. And so I don't recommend it, but for me, it worked out. And I went on to a career that I could have never imagined, calling races. Like, I just wanted to call races. And now, called the last 10 Kentucky Derbies. I still can't believe that.
That is a good story. The part where you said, I was at Pimlico more than I was there. That's fun. That is funny because Pimlico is so close.
It is close.
It's very close to Loyola. It's only like 5, maybe 10 minutes. I mean, in a car, you know what I mean? If that.
It was a little more fun for me to be at Pimlico, to be honest.
Yeah, no, but definitely is. Definitely is. It's funny. I'm just bringing this up out of nowhere because I know this, but they're going to be redoing both Pimlico and Laurel.
Yeah.
So me and my friends keep saying, well, when they go to Pimlico, like we gotta go. You know what I mean? Because I have a lot of friends who've, they've seen a race on TV and stuff, but never seen one in person. And I tell them, like, guys, it is so much better in person. Like, they just see it. They're like, oh, like we watched the Pegasus together. Like, yeah, this is fun. Like, my one friend had the trifecta or whatever, and he's like, yeah, this is fun. I'm like, listen, a lot more exciting in person. So
the atmosphere at the track is definitely a lot more exciting than watching it on TV. And Pimlico is it's one of those places that I'm glad it's sticking around. It sounded like for a while there it might be going away, and they were going to race at Laurel year round. But there's something about the charm of Pimlico and having racing in Baltimore. And I'm so glad it's going to be around for a long-term period now.
Yeah, there was a couple of times where me and one of my friends went there just to, place the bets because it's the closest place if you want to bet the horses to Loyola. And, it just walked around. We snuck past the security guards because it's a historic place. You know what I mean? Like you go outside and you see that little building they have with the
cupola.
What is it? The what?
They call it the cupola.
Yes, that's what it's called. Yes, yeah. And that is so cool to me. And you look at the track too, and you see those tight turns that they have, especially on the turf course and the dirt course. But it is such a cool track to me, and I'm happy that they're keeping it.
Yeah, for sure, I agree.
So the next thing, obviously, we're gonna just keep rolling with the Pimlico conversation here. The Preakness, it's next Saturday.
Yeah,
big deal. So no 'tis the law though, and I think that's a pretty big deal because he was the favorite going into that race, and he looked like the world beater. But unfortunately, couldn't get it done to Authentic. And I just want to hear what you thought about the Derby.
Well, when they turned for home in the Kentucky Derby, I thought 'tis the law was going right by Authentic. He looked like he was. He had, so much horse. Manny Franco was riding him with confidence. That he came right up to Authentic, and Authentic says, dude, I got more. And he just kept on rolling, and 'tis the law started spinning his wheels a little bit. And I don't think he really liked that track all that much.
I don't think he does either.
Yeah. Funny story. So a little bit, 2 days before the Kentucky Derby, I was doing a Zoom interview with the guy who is one of the sports anchors in Louisville, Kentucky. And they asked me how good 'tis the law was. And I said, this horse has the potential to be complete greatness from what I've seen. He could be as good or even maybe better than American Pharaoh, who won the Triple Crown in 2015. And the next day I get a text message from Bob Baffert, the trainer of American Pharaoh, who also is the trainer of Authentic. And he says to me, $1,000, you get 'tis the law, I get the field. So he was confident in his horse. So and he was right. So Authentic was really good in the Derby, and he's the rightful favorite in the Preakness. Without 'tis the law in there, he's going to have to deal with Art Collector.
Yeah, I'm a big Art Collector fan.
He's a really nice horse.
Yeah.
But I think if Authentic runs the way he did in the Derby, it'll be real tough to beat the Preakness.
Yeah, and it's worth noting too. I had one of my horse racing friends text me about this. Bob, when he wins the Kentucky Derby, is nearly unbeatable in the Preakness. I mean, he just keeps it rolling. You have to remember it's a shorter distance. I mean, the race might play more towards Authentic, honestly.
Well, the one difference this year is the time between the two races. It's always 2 weeks. This year it's 4. So that could and Art Collector is going to be fresh. So
yeah, he is.
We'll see, but if I had to place a bet, which we've discussed that I hardly ever do, I would probably bet on Authentic over Art Collector. And I don't think that there's too much else beyond them that's going to be, that good in there. I'm trying to think of who else. The horse that was third in the Derby, Mr. Big News. He's going to
Mr. Big News. He caught me
He
by
had a big,
surprise.
yeah, he made that. Me too. I saw him. I'm like, is that Mr. Big News making that big run on the turn? Because he was a big long shot in the
It
Derby, and then
was.
1,000 Words, the other Bob Baffert horse, will be in there too. So
Yeah, he had the accident in the paddock. That was a real shame. I was very high on 1,000 Words. He was, now that we're going into the Derby, I had future wagers on King Guillermo,
Mhm.
Art Collector, Nadal, Maxfield, and Charlatan. That's 5 horses.
0 for 5. Didn't even
And
get
then
there.
that day, I also bet 1,000 Words, and I'm like, all right, well, at least I get this money back.
I think you're a jinx.
I guess so. It's not even a losing jinx. Well, it is a losing jinx with those, but I mean, I know. Hopefully, Art Collector can get it done because I'm very fond of him.
He's a nice horse for
Yeah,
sure.
he's a very good horse. So my next thing for you is
Mhm.
what's kind of like your process? Like, obviously there's more horses when there's the Kentucky Derby. I see on Twitter like you're memorizing, the silks and stuff. Do you do that for the Preakness? It's going to be a lot less horses.
Not to the extent that I do for the Kentucky Derby, because you have, first of all, you've seen a lot of the Preakness horses in the Kentucky Derby just a few weeks ago, so that they're already in your mind. And even though silks are going to change, I asked a couple of people, and we go by jockey silks because it's the easiest thing to see, and usually they stay the same. But I think both Authentic and 1,000 Words are going to change silks because they're in a partnership. The silk,
Oh,
the colors of the owners. So 1,000 Words will probably run in the blue colors of Alba stable, and Authentic is going to run in the colors that 1,000 Words was supposed to run in the Derby, the Spendthrift Farm colors. So that's something that you have to get in your head.
same thing happened with Justify. Remember
Correct.
he switched from Windstar to, what was
China
it,
Horse Club.
China? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there'll be more studying for the Preakness than there is for the fifth race on a Wednesday, but it won't be like the Kentucky Derby because it's just there's no other race that I study for more than the Kentucky Derby. There's no other race that's watched more than the Kentucky Derby and has that many horses. So generally there's 20, and you have to know who they are like the back of your hand. When they leave that starting gate, you better know them, and there's no looking back. And so that's one of those things where you're just the more you're prepared, the better your call will be.
That's very true. So obviously you said that you spent a lot of time over at Pimlico. How do you feel about a return? I mean, are you happy to be coming back to Baltimore?
Yeah, I always. It's so funny. We talk about this. All the people in the media and my family and who lives down in Maryland can't believe it, but the Preakness is everybody's favorite race in the Triple Crown,
Mm-hmm.
and it's because the Kentucky Derby is just high pressure. Everybody's uptight, and then you've got that breath of fresh air when you come to the Preakness, where everybody's sort of just kind of low key and having fun, and I love it. And I love going back there. Pimlico is not the prettiest place in the world. It's a little beat up. It's a little old.
A little bit.
They're going to be tearing it down, but it's one of my places that's close to my heart, and I always love going up into that press box. And I actually call the race outside on the roof, so there is a little overhang which helps, but it's a different type of setup where I call that race. So it's kind of neat. I like it.
So during the Justify Derby, or not Derby, Preakness, when it was absolutely monsoon, you could barely see the backstretch.
Now that was that was
You
fog.
were outside though?
Yeah,
Wow.
Justify was all fog.
Oh, fog. I'm
And,
sorry, not rain.
the funny story, American Pharoah was rain. That was
Yes, I'm combined. I'm sorry.
pouring rain story. So American Pharoah, it had looked, it was about 8 minutes before the race, like a tidal wave was coming over Pimlico. It was so bad, and so I got drenched. And just kept on going, and got through it. With Justify, with the fog, luckily they had given me 2 high-def monitors right in front of me, and I normally call through binoculars.
Uh-huh.
And the producer for NBC said, "Hey, look, there's a lot of stages and tents in the infield, and you're going to have a lot of areas where you're not going to be able to see. So we're going to get you some monitors. As it turns out, I had to call the entire race off of those monitors because you couldn't even see the track. It was so foggy. So pretty crazy situation for Justify's Preakness.
Well, the same thing happened to you this summer at Del Mar. I remember I was watching that one race, and it's just like fog completely came out of nowhere that day. How that was crazy. I mean, how did you get through that race?
Yeah, I remember I was trying my best to get through as much of it as I could, and then I get to the point where there was just nothing.
Yeah.
And they're gone.
I remember they switched the camera, and you're like,
Yeah,
I'm like, no, he still can't see anything.
Still can't see, right? So if it's just an ordinary race, you just have fun with that, joke around with it. But if it's the Preakness, it's like, whoa, I got to do whatever I can to see. And luckily, the NBC people had great camera switches and had views for 90% of the race for me, so it worked out okay.
All right, so let me move on to the next thing. And we were just talking about Art Collector, Authentic. I said how you're out at Del Mar. You got to see Maximum Security run this year, and you got to see Maximum Security run last year a couple times. You called them in the Kentucky Derby. You called them in the Bold Ruler. What did you think? How much? I mean, obviously we know the stuff that happened with the whole trainer switch and stuff, but do you think he's better at all going into Baffert's barn? Do you think he's a different horse in any way? Like, what did you think?
It's hard to tell. I mean, he was such a good 3-year-old. He was pretty spectacular as a 3-year-old, and whether that was all legit or not, we're not sure because of what happened with the Jason Service trainer situation that folks can read up on if they want. I'm not going to get into it. But, the horse did go to Bob Baffert as a 4-year-old, and in his first race back, I called him in the San Diego Handicap, a race that everybody figured he'd win for fun, and he barely won.
Me included.
Yeah, it was really close. And then he sort of showed his true Maximum Security ability in the Pacific Classic after that. So, yeah, he's a really nice horse, extremely talented horse. And, all of the stuff that happened was not his fault.
Exactly.
And what I'm excited about is the Breeders' Cup this fall, when he runs against these 3-year-olds like Authentic and Tis the Law, and watch them all come together. And Baffert's got some other really good horses like Improbable, who's another really good horse
too.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a great Breeders' Cup Classic.
I hope Art Collector's in there too. That would really be a good one.
Well, if he wins the Preakness, I bet he will be, or even runs well in the Preakness. So, but it's a weird year, and it should end with a great Breeders' Cup Classic. And it's a shame again, no fans will be allowed to see it in person. But that's 2020 in a nutshell.
It's funny you bring up the no fans thing too, because I mean, obviously you said in New Jersey, I live in New Jersey. Monmouth Park has been having fans. I've been going there. I've been going up to the Meadowlands. I know out in Pennsylvania, Parks has some fans. There's places. Delaware has fans. There's places that have fans. Were you kind of surprised they did absolutely no fans at all? Like, I could see maybe decreasing the amount to reach like a capacity requirement, but like, what did you think?
Well, I think that all states and jurisdictions have their own set of rules that you have to abide by, and that's just the way it is. And when it's big events like the Kentucky Derby and the Breeders' Cup, it's tougher to limit attendance and how you do it, and where Monmouth can just kind of open the doors, and the amount of people that are going to come are going to be below the limit that they have set by the governor. So it's much more complicated in these other big races. So I understand where they're coming from. I mean, Kentucky Downs, where I just worked, they wanted to have fans, and they're like, we just don't have enough room if a bunch of people show up to socially distance these people. And it's just, everybody's got their own situations where, they have to figure out what's best. And that's what Keeneland came up with and Breeders' Cup came up with this fall, and all 3 Triple Crown races too. So and a lot of other sports are the same way. Major League Baseball has no fans. So we'll see.
So I have a couple more questions for you, but my
Yeah.
next one is, so I said all these places that you've called the races, and you've said them too. Your favorite? I have a feeling you're going to say Saratoga, but do you have one besides Saratoga?
Saratoga is a very special place.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I was still calling there, but I'm not. But I'll tell you what, Del Mar is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
There's just something about Del Mar, the fact that it's right on the Pacific Ocean. I mean, it's literally right there. The weather is absolutely gorgeous. Where I call the races is an open air situation. It is inside, but the front window is open, and the whole area is just great. So I mean, I love Del Mar. Trying to think of, I mean, Belmont is really cool. Monmouth Park is a cool place. I mean, I was there for 20 years, and I really enjoyed the atmosphere of Monmouth. There was always some sort of a crowd there and some excitement, and the people really enjoy coming to Monmouth Park. So I still live right down the street from it. So
Have you been this year?
I have not. I have not. I couldn't go after the Derby because I had to quarantine for 2 weeks.
Oh, that's right.
So I could not be seen on the grounds at Monmouth Park.
Mm. I forgot. That's funny. I,
Yeah.
I didn't I didn't realize that applied to you guys too. I didn't even think of that.
Yep.
So your fave track, we already got that. What about your favorite horse? Do you have a favorite horse that you've called?
Yeah. That's a slam dunk. That's American Pharoah.
Yeah.
It has to be. I mean, calling the first Triple Crown in 37 years is just the most amazing thing you could have ever imagined. And that Belmont Stakes was just it's something that'll stick in my head forever. The entire week leading up to it, when on Wednesday I woke up with a sore throat and I was worried that I was getting sick, and like, am I going to be able to talk? How am I going to be able to be on Saturday when I'm calling this horse going for the Triple Crown? And eventually I got better and better because the lady that works for NBC Sports, Diana Solomon, she also does she helps everybody with Monday night or Sunday night football as well. And she said, this is the potion I give John Madden when he has a sore throat back in the Madden days. It's just honey and lemon concentrate, no tea, just that you drink it cold. And my throat got better and better as the week went on. And so everything was okay there. And then the night before American Pharoah was going for the Triple Crown at Belmont, I went out to dinner with some of my NBC colleagues. And at the table next to us was Penny Chenery, the owner of Secretariat. And she came up and talked to us for a little while. And I'm like, I think this is going to happen. It's just got this feel that this
You're probably hoping you didn't jinx it, right?
Yeah, this horse is going to be the one, and I thought of during the week, like, what do I say if this horse wins the Triple Crown? And I'm like, what are people thinking? And I said, well, he's finally the one, and the 37-year wait is over.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what came out of my mouth as they came down the stretch at Belmont that day. And a guy that started out as an 18-year-old kid who just wanted to call races, at 30, it was 35 years and 1 day after my first race call, or 30 years and 1 day after my first race call, that I called American Pharoah winning the Triple Crown. And that was pretty cool. 30 years in a day. And, so it has to be him. My other favorite, and when he crossed the wire at Belmont, I remember I had cameras in the announcer's booth all around me, GoPros, all this stuff catching, my race call. And then I'm like, I got to get out of these cameras right now because I'm going to lose it after he won the Belmont. And I hid in the corner of the announcer's booth and just started bawling. And then I remember running to the front and just banging on the window while the fans below were just going crazy with excitement about this horse winning the Triple Crown. And the other Pharoah thing I'll never forget is when I never got a chance during the Triple Crown to actually meet the horse, be up close with the horse. So I asked Bob Baffert when American Pharoah was going to run on the Travers at Saratoga.
Oh, I got a good video for you after this.
Yeah, if I could meet him. So he said, sure, come by after his morning workout on Friday morning, which 18,000 people showed up for. They were abandoning cars on Union Avenue in Saratoga just to see this horse exercise in the morning. And when that happened, after it was over, I took a golf cart to the barn area, and they had barricades up. You can't come in. No one can come in. And the security guard saw me coming and says, Bob's expecting you. And so I walked under the barricade. He was Jim Barnes, Bob's assistant, was walking American Pharoah around, cooling him out. And then Bob said, okay, it's picture time. And Bob Baffert hands me American Pharoah by his lead. And I am not a hands-on horse person, but American Pharoah not only was the Triple Crown winner, but he was like a golden retriever. He is just the most easygoing, cool horse you could ever imagine. And here I am, and Bob walked away.
Oh, so you're by yourself.
Just me and American Pharoah with all these photographers around, and Bob Baffert's wife took my cell phone so she could take pictures. And American Pharoah's looking at me, and I'm looking at him with this huge smile on my face. I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. And it's something that in no way I'll ever forget. You know, just to be with that horse after he won the Triple Crown. I'm like, I'm holding the Triple Crown winner. Just amazing.
So you talk about how much you love American Pharoah.
Mm-hmm.
Let me share my screen here. I just want to share my screen real quick just so I can show you a video. Okay. Can you see my screen or no?
Right now I'm just seeing you.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe I'll just play the noise for you, and then you'll know.
Turned. They're 4 lengths ahead of Keen Ice. And as they turn for home, American Pharoah has lost the lead at the top of the stretch. Frosted on the outside is now in front, but American Pharoah is battling on from the inside. He's showing all this fight with 1 furlong to run. And here on the far outside comes Keen Ice with a late threat. American Pharoah put away Frosted. He has to deal with Keen Ice. Keen Ice has got him. Keen Ice has won the Travers over American Pharoah.
I mean, that must have been heartbreaking for you to call, because once he passed the first horse, Frosted, he looked like he won the race.
Yeah, you could tell though that he was definitely starting to shorten his stride. And Frosted, and the funny thing was Frosted was a late jockey change because his rider Joel Rosario was injured in the race before. So Jose Lezcano picked up the mount on Frosted, and Jose's very aggressive. And he took it to American Pharoah and made him fight and fight and fight. And American Pharoah finally just said, okay, I'm done with you. I'm pulling away. And then, here was Keen Ice just waiting and, just in the right place at the right time. He ran a great race, but he was able to run down American Pharoah. And I remember Saratoga has this nickname as the Graveyard of Champions, because all these, big name horses have all lost there. And at the very end of that call, I said, the Graveyard of Champions has claimed another. And it was just, it was sad in a way, but exciting in a way, because, it was another moment of history. Here's the Triple Crown winner losing the Travers at Saratoga. And then he came back in the Breeders' Cup Classic and just destroyed everybody.
Yeah,
by like 5 lengths, and it was just so fun to watch and call. It was that might have been that Breeders' Cup Classic might have been more emotional for me than the Belmont. It was an amazing way to see him go out, because you knew it was his last race. I remember I said in the call, American Pharoah comes into his final furlong, and knowing this was going to be it for him, and it was amazing to watch.
Yeah, I think another thing that is cool about American Pharoah is how well his offspring are doing right now. everyone associates him with Triple Crown, but they're fantastic on turf. That's where they're making a name for themselves. Four-wheel drive last year won the Breeders' Cup. That was an offspring of American Pharoah.
Yeah, especially turf, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to be better on turf. And one of the other jobs I've been doing now is working for a sales company, Fasig Tipton, and there have been, the American Pharaohs were going for big time money at the sale. There was one that sold for, I think it was $1,250,000, a 1-year-old horse. So you don't know how good this horse is going to be, but
No, big risk.
You're betting $1,250,000 that the horse is going to be pretty good. So,
Yeah.
that's what American Pharoah has accomplished as a sire it's been pretty impressive. So we'll see if he keeps it up.
All right, and one last question I have. I forgot to ask this. Is there one place in Baltimore, whenever you go for the Preakness, that you always visit?
Yeah, I mean, our hotel, we stayed right downtown by the waterfront. So our tradition is always on Saturday after the Preakness, we go to Fleming's restaurant right by our hotel. So that's if you show up there on Preakness night, chances are you'll see me there. It's right on the waterfront in Baltimore. But another great place that I like to go to is Michael's by Timonium, it's right across the street from Timonium. Best crab cakes around. I love the crab cakes at Michael's, and I always tell people, being a guy from Maryland, that I refuse to ever eat crab cakes in any of the other 49 states because they don't know how to do it. So no matter what, if I'm in Maryland, I'm going to have crab cakes, and if I'm anywhere else, I will not.
You like Old Bay on them?
Of course, you have to have it.
Typical Maryland guy.
Yeah.
All right, Larry, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I thought it was a good interview. I'm really happy you did it. I'm happy we could finally get it done.
No problem, Jimmy. It was a lot of fun, and we'll be hopefully seeing you down the road.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great rest of your day, Larry.
Okay, you too, bud.